Alrighty. Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of the Extra Mile podcast. Things are a little bit different for us in episode 9 as we have gone virtual. You guys, of course, know why we were going virtual, but I am super excited because I'm able to connect with somebody who's not right down the road from me. It's really interesting how we've been able to connect through social media and through similar interests, but we've been able to really have some similarities kind of click and interest to get to know each other. And for the first time, we're going to go face to face here virtually, get to know each other a little bit better. And we're going to discuss some things that I think are going to bring a lot of value to you guys today. So with no further ado, my friend BRYCE McKinley, aka Coach Sharpen, here on the screen with us today. And I'm going to let him chat a few seconds, talk about who he is, what he does primarily, and then we're going to dig a little bit deeper into everything as well. Welcome, BRYCE.
I love it. Bobby, first and foremost, man, Mr. Brightside himself, thank you so much, man. I love your energy, dude. Like when you walk into a room, either virtually or not, dude, between your smile and your confidence and just knowing like where you're at, where you're going, like people should follow you. So I'm honored to be on here. I'm excited to see where your show and your podcast goes, and just honored to be a part of it, man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you, man, for all those kind words, man. It is interesting, man, how the whole Mr. Brightside thing's just kind of been a play off of my like optimistic mindset, you know, and I love like being able to spread that around. I'm not perfect. That's for darn sure. I'm going to have my down moments, but you know, as long as we can rebound off of them, that's what it's all about, man. So it's really, really cool, really exciting because we have some similar backgrounds, you know, kind of counted out, not really, you know, expected to be close to what we've accomplished today, and definitely have a lot of underdog qualities, right? The against all odds kind of climb. And that's what it's all about. You know, I find myself having these conversations often enough, especially in like the detention centers and with some of these troubled kids. And I oftentimes, you know, tell them that like, listen, you know, I know it seems kind of unusual, but your mistakes have built you a stage for something so phenomenal. We know that greatness has been built by very humble beginnings. And, you know, we've seen the greatest stories come from the story where they were never supposed to make it, right? And, you know, I'm a big Eagles fan, like the Nick Foles taking on the Tom Brady's in the Super Bowls, right? And like those kind of things just build these phenomenal stories that we all fall in love with. So let's kind of start with that, BRYCE. Like take us back to, how this whole thing started with Mr. BRYCE McKinley and how you became Coach Sharpen.
Man, I appreciate that. So first and foremost, I give all glory to God. Glory goes to God. Like without him, I couldn't do anything. And so that's my first and foremost. With that said, if you guys don't know who I am, my name is BRYCE McKinley. I go by Coach Sharpen on Instagram. And I'm an international speaker, keynote speaker, coach, mentor, dad, husband, and not in that order. You know, whichever comes to me in that moment is where I'm at. That's my superhero. That's where I'm being. I'm always present 100% of the time. It doesn't matter whether I'm being a dad, I'm in that moment. If I'm being a husband, I'm in that moment. And it's interesting that the segue into this intro, you talk about that stage, right? You talk about that platform that people don't even realize that they have. And it took a lot of hiccups, hangups, and hurts for me to recognize that. And so I know that if BRYCE McKinley, Coach Sharpen, has had those types of limiting beliefs, those types of defeating thoughts and questions, that some of you listening might have those same feelings. And so I hope that by the end of this podcast that I can encourage you. I hope that you continue to listen to, the Extra Mile podcast and get inspired, but not just get inspired, actually do something. I say in one of our groups, like how we met, right? Like through leading through change group. It's like, share it out, like it, love it, hate it, leave a review. It doesn't matter. Just don't do nothing. And that applies to everything. So, man, a little bit about where I've come from. Forgive me. I've been screaming, yelling, preaching, and teaching as of this recording for the last 72 hours. It's been an amazing experience. We can talk about that later if you want. But, at the end of the day, I've been at the lowest of lows and I've been at the highest of highs. I mean, hell, the most sought after, highly paid motivational speakers coming to my event in October this year, 2020. Like Dr. Eric Thomas is speaking at my event. It's an amazing blessing to have. That's a great problem to have, right? It's an overwhelming problem to have with all of the things that goes into that and the network and the coddle. But it hasn't always been like that, you know? There's been times where I was sleeping in my car. There was times where there was a pistol in my mouth. There was a time where I had the world prior to that by the you-know-what. And there's been times where I thought the world owed me everything. There was times where I thought I would take everything. And so I think that to really break this down and digest that, we have to go to the very root, right? When you want to look at the flower and the blossoms and the beauty that it has, you got to go to the root. And before the root even occurs, you have to look at the seed. You have to put the seed in the dirt, it has to die to itself, be in darkness, and just be separated from everything before it knows what it wants, and it fights to bust out, it fights to live, and it fights to sprout, it fights to grow, right? So let's look at that seed. I know, Bobby, people are listening to your podcast because they're looking for that one thing. They're looking for that, that's it. This is why I've been listening to this. And I hope that by the end of this episode, you take something and you apply it, you get results, and you make a shift. And so let's look at that seed. You know, I'll go back. I'll never forget my first entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur, Bobby. I think here in my short, as of this recording, 38 years in life, I've had close to 20 businesses, bought, sold, failed, all of the above, super successful. Every place in business, had probably close to 20 different companies up to this point. But my very first business was someone else's that I just owned. I was 8 years old. My parents we were poor, man. We grew up dirt poor, grew up in a very like cult-like religion. So like everything that I knew about God was this one little box that fit in their religious beliefs. And I mean, you talk about church 8 days a week, bro.
Wow.
Twice on Sunday, every day for something, whether it was preparing for Sunday school, parents in the choir, the men's quartet, the women's trio. Like, dude, I was a church kid, quote unquote church kid. Like I was the goody that nobody talked to at school because he's the weird one that can't go play gym or go to the school dance, right?
But that was your norm. That was your norm though, right? Like that was, it felt so normal because you knew nothing different.
I didn't know any different. I was the judgmental Christian that everybody hates, right? Like, you guys are all going to hell going to the movies. Like, that was normal to me. And my parents were super poor. And I believe that, the Bible says, whether you adhere to the Bible or not, like the Bible is the most motivational, most inspirational, best book, best all-time selling book of all time. You don't have to be a Christian to read the Bible, right? The Bible says that all of our steps are ordered. And I'll never forget, at 8 years old, I wanted to help my parents. And so I started hustling. Like I started following the paper boy around, picking his brain, got in touch with his manager, got the paper route manager to give me a route. I worked a route for like 2.5, 3 months, made more money than my parents were making combined. It was a joy to be able to take them out to eat after church on Sunday, right? Like I was that kid. I was this good, soft-hearted kid, man. And then the world hit me. The world hit me right between the eyes. And at the age of like 8 years old, I'm doing this paper route. And I realized that nobody's ever going to do anything for me. I didn't realize this till I was an adult, but this was my first experience. Karen came over. God bless Karen. I wonder where she's at, by the way. Karen came over and she sat me down with my parents, was paying me what would be my last paycheck in her eyes. And she was explaining as best as she could to this 8-year-old boy that I had to be 10. She thought I was 10. Dude, I'm 6'5", 250. Like, I've always been a big-ass dude. She thought that I was older than that. And she was explaining that when doing the payroll and paperwork that it came back and they had to let me go. I said, listen, Karen, my family can't afford to lose this income right now. So here's what we're going to do. Like, I want 5 or 6 routes. And so why don't we put this one in my dad's name? And if I do a good job, when I turn 10, you give me 5 routes. Fair enough? Like, I'm closing deals. And I didn't even know what the heck I was doing. She looked at my dad, and my dad, so my dad is one of the most soft-spoken, like, he just he just gets the job done. He's a hard worker, and that's about it, right? He looks over and he goes, well, that makes sense. In his deep baritone voice, well, that makes sense. So we did. And wouldn't you know, between the age of 8 and 9 and the next like 12 to 13 months, I wasn't even 10 yet. They ended up giving me like 5 different routes, put them all in my dad's name. I was making more money than my parents were, just with the one route, let alone, I converted them all, whatever. We're not going to go into all the details. Right, I was doing really well.
Yeah.
And then life happens.
Every time.
My parents started fighting. My dad's working 2 or 3 jobs. And this good old Christian boy seeing everything that I knew as normal pivot, shift, and come crumbling down around me. My parents started filing for divorce. I was like 10 years old. And yeah, man, I wanted nothing to do with that version of myself, that version of God. I wanted nothing to do with that. So I went hard, bro. Like literally the first week after my dad moved out, I went to Kmart. Do you remember Kmart?
Yeah.
Like I went to Kmart to their little jewelry section. I grabbed the ear piercing gun and like pierced my own ear, dude. I was going to be a rebel. I knew it. And never forget that got infected. Is your podcast like G-rated? If we
no,
okay.
Absolutely. Please let loose.
Okay, so I took this fucking gun and just never forget. There's blood all over my mom's car. It's just like, what did you do? My dad's like screaming at me on the phone because my mom called him. What do you want me to do with this boy? And to this day, the hole's still there, but it got infected. I never wore an earring, but it was like 2 or 3 days I had an earring in. Like I was gonna go one way or the other, right?
Right.
And that took me down the path of like gangbanging. Like I went from church kid sitting on the front row of church to within probably 18 months, like 11 years old, 12 years old, I was selling dope, gangbanging, just living that life. My mom moved into the inner city in the housing projects and things like that. And I mean, if you know Southside Chicago, it's one of the worst neighborhoods in America, even to this day. And yeah, man, between that and then going back and forth into the Quad Cities, which is like Illinois-Iowa border, man, I was running kilos of cocaine every day across the Illinois-Iowa border and the Indiana border. And it was a nuts life. I never could have imagined that would have been my life. But
it's so interesting, real quick, not to interrupt you, but you're right. Like it's bizarre because our expectations for ourselves evolve in situations like that. I've seen a number of people that lived like, went to the private school and went through, grew up in churches, pastors' kids, like all that stuff. And then the moment they jump. And so then, it creates a whole different set of expectations for yourself. So while you're living in this bizarre moment of this wasn't supposed to be me, you create this other version of what you're supposed to turn out like. And talk about that a little bit. Like as that started to develop, you're obviously adopting behaviors and things like that you've never seen before, never done before. But you went all in with it. What then, as you started all that, what did your expectations turn into for yourself? Like, what did you think you were going to end up doing once you got into all that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I appreciate you asking. It's something that I've thought about. And if you only know one thing, right, like that's your culture, your heritage, or whatever, right? Let's say you're Hispanic or African American or whatever. Like that's all you know.
Yep.
And so when little white boy comes into the hood and you've been fed all these lies that we're all bad, or, I'm just using that as an experience or an example. Like I've got to go 10 times harder because I don't know what you know. I don't know what you've seen, but I've got to act like I do. And so I've chameleon. I became a chameleon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing the power of affirmations and the power of visualization. When you can see what you need to become and don't act on it, like you can apply this nugget to your whole life, like you're going to fail. And I knew that failure in my environment was death. Failure in my environment was death. I didn't have any other choice. And so, you know, I start going into my closet. I call my head my closet. I go into my closet and I'm changing clothes. I'm in there like, this is who I am, talking to myself every morning before I'd hit the road. Like, dude, I was scared shitless. I was 11, 12, 13 years old hanging out with Mo G's. Like, you know what that is, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
100%. Yeah.
I got to show up 10 times harder. I'll never forget. Like one of the times somebody pulled a gun on me. Dude, I shit in my pants. But you know, I did. Elbow to the face, broke his jaw. Like I stepped, like I didn't know what I was doing. I just had to do what I've seen other people do and then go bigger. So dream, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just wanted to say something real quick because I think it's just very interesting and we'll come back to it because I'll let you continue. But it's so interesting how when you experience a fear of failure that leads to that kind of a consequence, right? And then later on in business, you hear people talk about fear of failure. And we're like,
get out of here.
What? Like, you don't even have anything to lose, really. Like, this is let's go full speed ahead type of stuff, man. So it's really interesting. As you brought that up, I'm like, that's right. Like, when you experience that kind of fear of failure, right? Like, I'm going to die if I fail, then nothing else holds a candle to that. So we could see downtimes in business. We could see like a bad market. It's never going to phase us because we've actually seen fear in its rawest form. So, but go ahead. I think that's really interesting and we'll come back to it.
I'm excited to like be able to, by the time we wrap this up, you guys are going to have so much that you can take away and apply to everything, because when you've lost everything, but you still have life, like you can take everything away from me right now and I'm going to be smiling just as big, if not bigger, because now I know what not to do. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep grinding. I'm going to keep smiling. I'm going to keep loving people. I'm going to keep serving, and I'm going to get 10 times more than what I have right now. So sometimes I wish, like, I'm not even going to say that. I got to do that.
Yeah. But I know what you're going to say, like, because you're going to show them how you can do it again. Yeah.
And so, you know, my dream, right? You asked me, like, what was that big picture? Like, what kept me going or something like that?
Yeah.
My dream was, as I would drive into Chicago, I would see the skyline. And back then it was the Sears Tower. Now it's like the Wills Tower. That was the tallest building in Chicago at the time. And I remember, I'm going to have an office at the top of that thing. That was my goal. I didn't care how I did it. And wouldn't you know it, within a matter of years, I had basically my own office, but that was because I was selling dope to the executives downtown Chicago, hanging with doctors and lawyers and VPs and CEOs. And they gave me my own office. Like, when I would walk in, it was like I was on payroll. I would go to my office, do my thing, and walk back out through the office and distribute. It was nuts.
It's bizarre, man. It's so bizarre because I remember that too. I wasn't moving kilos or had an office or anything like that, but the list of your clients, when it happens, you're like, really? Like, it amazes you who ends up being in your new paper route.
Right.
Your new paper route.
Exactly. And so it's interesting because in that life, like we were talking about, like, what do you have to lose? When you have nothing but your life to lose, you don't let it go so easily, and you work a little harder and you have a different perspective. Well, I went so hard that by the age of 17, I've seen everything. I've seen husbands knock out their wives' teeth to smoke them for dope. I've seen, you know, kids getting murdered and friends getting murdered and rape and prostitution. Like, it was just normal. It was normal. And that's crazy to think that that's a normal thing that cultures and lifestyles go through. And by the age of 17, I was facing some pretty hefty criminal charges. Thank God I've never had a felony conviction. I can't say that I've ever been to prison, but I should be. I should have. I mean, I beat 2 murder cases, some trafficking cases. all on loopholes. I love law. I love reading. And so,
Me too.
dude, I would just dig deep, sitting in county jails, fighting my cases.
Again, because we had to. If we didn't learn the law, if we didn't become great at that too right now, then our life's going to be taken in a much different way. But still taken nonetheless. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just the same way you put in all that effort to stay alive in the first place, right? Was the same way we put that effort in our cell, trying to find the way out and survive and get our life back. No, it makes perfect sense, man. Lines right up.
Yeah. And it was scary. Like here I am. I'm just a church kid. Like I shouldn't be sitting in jail, right? Because now my tapes and my stories and my maps of who I really am, like I'm just this kind, loving hearted person that has to be hard. Like, who the hell? Okay, so now I'm fighting for my life in a different way, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll never forget, I ended up getting my the 2 homicide cases were dismissed. They were acquitted. And my uncle grabbed me by the ear and was like, basically, you're gonna come live with me. Slept on my uncle's couch for several months and just had a second chance at life, basically. It was probably like my 5th chance at life at that point. 7th, actually. It
was the last chance you were going to need.
It was the last one that I thought I would need.
Yeah.
It was the last one that I thought I would need.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. So then my goals shift, right? Like my goals shift, like, okay, now I'm going to get that same big office, but it's going to be for the right reasons. And he had me detailing cars at a car dealership, and here I am seeing all these, old car sale guys from the 80s and 90s, like at the peak of their career, selling 15, 20 cars a month. Some of the average guys, selling 11 or 12. And then what the national average, even to this day, is like 10 cars a month, right? But they're making 6 figures, 5, very close to it, 80 to 100 grand back in the 90s and early 2000s. Like, that's good money for these guys in Iowa, right?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's good money for anybody.
Yeah, I was about to say.
And here I am, like, detailing cars and seeing nice cars, big money. They're throwing parties. I can do that.
Right.
Oh, I can do that. So I'll never forget, I begged my uncle for a shot for probably 6 months, 7 months or so. And it was in December. My birthday is Christmas Eve, by the way. Try competing with Jesus, like when your birthday's So I never had anything worth a darn anyways, but I knew that at 18, I could be put on the sales team. So I begged my uncle to give me that shot. And the week before, it was snowing down like crazy, Iowa blizzard, windy, cold. Nobody's buying a car, going out driving in that crap. He said, son, if you can sell a car today, I'll put you on the team next week. Shoot. I grabbed a phone book so quick. I went back to the back of the dealership. I sat kind of by the service department because nobody was in there. It was quiet. I didn't have an office, right? I just started calling. And I'll never forget, I got a hold of this gentleman. He knew me. He knew my name. He was a police officer. He said, son, I used to be on that beat. And now you're stalking me. You're in Iowa. I'm in Iowa. Like, I'll come see you, boy. I'll never forget. He said, I'll come see you, boy. He's just an old man. He came down. He said he had an oil change that he needed to get anyways. He's like, I'll meet you in the service department. He came down, and by the end of that day, I sold him a new truck, an F-150, Ford Ranger, and his wife an Explorer. I sold 3 vehicles my first day.
Smokes.
Dude, I was hooked. Oh,
it's so addicting, man. It is unreal. The thrill of signing a deal of any kind, I think, just it's insane. And
I made like 9 or 10 grand that day. Like those 3 cars, they weren't big whale deals. They were used cars that I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I made like 10 grand that day. Paid a few days later on Friday. Dude, I was hooked.
It's life-changing, man. It is. And that my first sales, and we'll stay on track here, but my first sales position when it became a commission only type of thing, man, it took what was already kind of a self-employed mentality that existed in me and any other job I did have, and it just enhanced it exponentially, because now for the first time ever, my direct performance today is going to change my check this week. And it just created this entrepreneurial mindset that just never died. So I get it, dude. That thrill, and that, especially with the background and stuff like that, because like we didn't think that was ever going to be possible for us, and then here we are doing it. And that's what's really like, it's groundbreaking. It's freaking groundbreaking for ourselves. But go ahead, take me the rest of the way, man. Take me the rest of the way down this ride.
What I love about guys like you and I, and especially you guys listening, like, we're so simple, but we complicate things because we see so much. We see so much more, but we don't look at what's important, which is our potential. And so we overcomplicate things. I had to learn that the hard way, because over the next year and a half, from 18 to 20, I would become the #1 car salesman in the world. It was amazing, like, what I was doing. I didn't know it because I had my head down. I'm in Iowa. I didn't know. And I'll never forget, at 19, I got asked to go to what's called the National Walk-Around Competition. It's basically like a mock test drive that you do, and you show off a vehicle, product, features, and benefits. And there's about 500,000 to 600,000 applicants every year. I got asked by one of our regional managers if I would go, and I went. It's all graded by your peers, so it's really hard to get to the top in this program. Nobody's ever been there twice. At 19, I got asked to go for the first time, and I would be asked the next 4 years.
Holy smokes.
And not only did I go 4 years, I won it twice, and I got second place twice. And at the age of 21, I was recruited out of my dealership. Ford Motor Company wrote me a $10 million check and said, hey, you're coming to work for us. You're going to teach our dealerships what you're doing. And basically hired me a coach to help me form a company. So my company was contracted with Ford. And I traveled the world teaching my very simple 5 steps to sales, 5-step sales conversation. And that was when I fell in love with mentoring and coaching, because I knew that if I had somebody holding me accountable, someone, holding me accountable to my own words, like, this is my process, they got out of my head. If I'm not being integral to myself, how the hell am I going to be integral to anybody else?
100%.
Right? And so I did it my way. I went hard, and I went from dealership in Iowa to traveling the world. And then by 23, I got a contract with Nissan, and then Toyota, and then Honda. It just spiraled, all these dealer programs. And then we hit 2006, 7, 8, and 9 when the economy started doing its thing, right? And that's right about the same time I started losing everything. And it wasn't due to the economy. And 2006, my wife lost a baby, and we had a pretty interesting relationship. I mean, she was married to someone else, and it was his, and we were messing around, and it was just it was a crazy lifestyle. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars, and women and cars and boats. Like, we had everything, the American dream. In 2006, God sat us down and said, you guys need to do this together. She lost the baby. She started drinking. Her mom was my Sunday school teacher, by the way, like when I was a kid. Like, she was a church kid too. Never drank a day in her life. She didn't know the lifestyle. She always listened to my stories and lived vicariously through me. 2008 comes around, and up and down through rehab she was, and she's like, this is it. I want to do it. I want to do it right. That was June 12th. I'll never forget that, 2008. We were going to do this. She was getting out of rehab. She'd been clean for a week or two. Like, she's going to do this. The lady had 5 daycare. She had 5 businesses. A daycare with 3 sites and a salon, the Nevada salon, like very high-end salon with 2 sites. Like, we were doing well. And due to losing the baby, we were going through some legal stuff, and I was just working, and she was going through all this stuff, depositions, and reliving everything. And what most people would say a moment of weakness, she felt that there was nothing worth living for. And I never forget, Friday, June 13th, I got the phone call that she had taken her life. And in that moment, I didn't have anything else to live for. And so we had a cabin. I moved up to Wisconsin, and I moved up to Wisconsin and just I lost my mind. I checked out. I mean, $80 million in the next 18 months went to nowhere, but up my nose, in a bottle, fishing equipment, boat equipment, cars, giving cars away, women. It was crazy.
Distractions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll never forget March 2010, this crazy Italian girl that I'm like, she's like my next Bonnie, right? She's like, Bryce, we need to talk. I'm like, oh God, this is one of those talks. Like, I'm out of control. I know. She's like, no, we need to talk. I'm pregnant. I'm like, oh shit. Okay. And that was when we found out that we had my little guy, the middle school millionaire. Like, dude, I got something to live for. Okay. And that was the last time I got like completely wasted drunk in that period. I sobered up. We had our son in November, got a contract with Tyco Corporation, like one of the largest corporations in the world. I renegotiated, got a new contract with them, moved to Texas. And then the fun wasn't over. Let's say that. Because while I was sober, she never put down the pills and the dope, and came home one day and here she is, passed out in the bed, pills all over, and my baby boy that's a couple months old rolling around in it. I'm like, why? This is crazy. I thought we were doing this. Picked up my son, packed a bag, and what does every good gangster do? Got to get evidence, right? So I put him back down in the pills, took some pictures, went to the hotel room, and on Monday morning, I filed for custody of my son. And that would be the fight of my life. I had about $200,000 left at that point out of over $80 million, literally drained my savings account to fight for custody of my son. I didn't give a shit about the money. I had a life to live for, a life. And man, lost my contract with Tyco, sleeping in my car, but I got custody of my son. And at this point, it's 2011, September 28, 2011. My brother's in the joint because my brother didn't handle the whole thing too well, and he ended up doing some crazy stuff. My brother's locked up at this point. He's doing like 20 years, so he ended up doing like 11 years and spent money, wasted money on attorneys trying to fight his case. Finally got him out, a pardon. Like, that was a whole crazy ordeal. I just talked to my brother. Like, I'm like, man, like, what are we going to do when you get out? We always did business planning once a week. We'd talk about our business, how we were going to do. I was in a good mood. And something clicked. I said, I can't do this one more time. And I wrote my son a note. I wrote my mom a note. I pulled my car out into the middle of the street. And the same 40 cal that sits next to my bed tonight hasn't jammed since, never jammed before. But September 28, 2011, it jammed in my mouth 3 times. I was done. I got so mad at God. The version that I knew was this Hitler, like Hitler style God, like you're going to heaven or hell. There was no in between. And that's how I grew up. And so when I couldn't even take my own life, I knew I wasn't in control. And I hated that. And I got mad. I'm like, show up. I was screaming and yelling at him. I'll never forget fighting with God. Like, I've been in a lot of fights, bro. Like, these are teardrops removed off my face, like broken knuckles, teeth in my knuckles. Like, dude, you fight with God, you ain't winning, bro. And I'll never forget. I was like, all right, I'm in. I'm sold out. He's like, I need to sharpen you a little bit. Now, I'll never forget hearing that. But then what's even crazier is, remember my son at this point, he's just about 1 year old.
Right.
He's not talking. Babies don't talk.
No.
I heard, Daddy, everything's going to be okay. I turn around, he's sound asleep in the backseat of the car. And all I remember is waking up the next morning to a phone call. So I don't know. There's about 12 hours there that I don't remember anything, but it's the best night's sleep I've ever had in my life. I woke up to a phone call. there was fraud on my bank account. Mind you, I had $32 to my name. Like, I knew where my account was. We don't mess with our money, right, bro?
Right.
I knew where my paper was. I had $32. And I called my bank back. They said, is there a local branch? I was like, yeah. I went down the street, pulled into the bank, and, of course, I don't stink like a normal homeless person, like that persona, but I've been sleeping in my car, showering in bathrooms, and stealing like cologne because I got to smell good at least when I walk in the place. I'm stinking. I've been stressed, crying, breakdown. This last 24 hours has been hell. I walk in the bank, and this banker looks at me, and she goes, is everything okay? I said, can't get any worse. God's got this. What's up? They sat me down. They said, well, there's a couple of deposits here we just need to verify. And I'm like, what? Apparently an old client that I had a contract with paid an old invoice that they found. We ended up calling them and just verifying $20,000 in my account.
No way.
Yeah. I look at my little guy. I look at her. I said, everything's going to be all right. This is okay. I'm in. I'm sold out. I kept telling myself that. I'm sold out. Whatever you need me to do, bro. I call God bro. Like, you can call him Jesus. I call him Jesus too. But he's my bro, dude. He's gangster. Like, you listen to my son talk, and he's like, dude, God's a party animal. He turned water into wine. Like, he's not this like uptight like POS that everybody feels like they have to please. No, like, he's already done it for us, right? That's my guy. He's gangster as shit.
That's right.
And I just started having this relationship. And what's really crazy, I'm like, Cranston, we're going to get the best meal we've ever had. We went to some taco place, of course, We went and got these badass tacos. We're sitting at the park, and I get another phone call. Mr. McKinley, we found an application, and we're just wondering if you're still looking for a place to live. We got a 1-bedroom apartment opened up.
What the heck?
Dude, this is the same day, like 3 or 4 hours later.
I'm following. Everything's going to be all right the night before, 12 hours of sleep. Your son says it's going to be. I'm following the whole thing, baby. I'm listening. You got me on the edge of my seat, bro.
Yeah. I'm like, get out of here. Look at God. Look at God, bro. And my son, of course, he didn't know what's going on.
Right,
and,
yeah.
So we move in. We go there. We fill out the paperwork. I'm like, I don't have any money. I've got like $800 because, and then God showed me how to manage money. Like, they put up, because of the fraudulent activity, they could only give me like $2,000 a month for the next 10 months. They put a free. So now I've got $2,000 a month. Like, I've got a payroll. I'm great. No deposit, no first month's rent. So like, I'm good for the next 2 months. I could stack some chips, find a job. Like, that's what I was going to do. And then, dude, a couple months later, like, meet this beautiful girl. She takes me with nothing. Like, you guys can't see this listening to it, but dude, I got a 12. Like, my wife, like, she takes me as I am. She's got like 20 degrees, stereotypical. And dude, she's way out of my league. And I'm like, come on, bro. Like, I'm trying to, is this a distraction? Like, should I do what God says and just stay single? Or should I like mess with this girl out of marriage? Like, I'm trying to do the right thing. I don't know what's right yet. Like, my pastor, I talked to him about it. My pastor said, bro, flirt to convert. Because she was a Buddhist when I met her. She was always curious, always asking questions. And so I started dating this beautiful Asian girl, like, smart. She works at the hospital. She's a nurse and children's nurse at that. She doesn't have any of her own kids, but she can be great with kids. Like, it's like all these plus minuses. I'm going through my head. Like, I got to stay focused, but there's this distraction. And it wasn't a distraction at all. It was amazing. And over the next couple of weeks, I was filling out applications. I found wholesaling real estate online, like a little course that was online. And I was watching this YouTube video. I watched 2 or 3 YouTube videos. And if you're ever going to be an entrepreneur, like, watch 1 or 2, but after the 3rd one, like, check the hell out. Like, don't sit there and go down this spiral of analysis paralysis and then wonder why you can't ever get anywhere. Like, watch 1 or 2 and go implement the stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And I never forget, I started calling like realtor.com and fizbo.com and Craigslist. And I was just pitching people like, let me buy their house. And that first month, like the average to this day, the first, people that are doing wholesaling real estate, they average between 3 to 5 contracts a year, and they make between $70,000 and $80,000 a year. That's the average person. The big guys, they're doing 100 to 120 contracts a year, making $1 million to $1.5 million. I did 23 my first month.
Wow.
32 my second month. All by myself. I just applied the same principles, and I knew what it took for success and adapted the model, right? And up until 2 years ago, we were the #1 wholesale company in the real estate space. It was me, and I ended up partnering with some guys. I don't need to go down this whole long story, but I had a partnership with these guys because I didn't know the backside. I just knew how to sell on the front side, and they had some of their systems already in place. And we built in the last, in less than 5 years, we built a $154 million company, almost like doubled what I had lost. And 2 years ago, God said, the world needs more. Remember, I said I'd sharpen you. And I speak and teach in very simple word frames and tracks so that people can follow. At least I try. And sharpen to me, just like in the Bible, iron sharpens iron. Sharpen to me is an acronym that stands for selflessly helping already persons eager for nurturing. You cannot work with everybody, but you want to work with people that are serious about working with you.
100%. 100%.
So, selflessly helping already persons eager for nurturing. And I became this persona, and I was like, man, we need to teach this process. And my partners didn't want to do it. I'm like, well, I'm going to prove it to them. I'm just going to go do it and then come back with results, and then we'll show them we can do this. And so I ended up finding my first student by accident. He was actually being coached by another mentor, and the other mentor basically told him not to quit his day job on a live stream. And I was like, what kind of asshole is this coach? And then I find out all these people hiring coaches and committing suicide because they don't ever have like implementable steps, and they're losing 401k in the real estate space, $100,000 coaches that don't ever give you jack. I got pissed. And so I went hard. In my first month, I did close to $100,000 in coaching. The difference is I'm the only coach in real estate that can say I've got a 100% success rate. All of my students are closing deals month in, month out, 10xing their investment. What's even cooler about this is that my first student was 18, in the military, stationed in Misawa, Japan, working my process over the phone, calling into Houston, Texas. Like, I never met the kid. Everything was done virtually. So, like, yeah,
it's insane.
It's insane.
Well, the reason, I mean, real quick, if you don't mind me interrupting, one of the reasons why you've had the success that you had, I mean, it's in your acronym. You're not looking to help everybody. You're willing to help the people that are eager for nurturing and ready. And that part of it is huge. The people that are out here trying to play superhero and help everyone, it can't work. It's just like, the experiences that I've had with people who have addictions. They're not ready to come out of those addictions until they're ready to beat their addiction. I can try my damnedest as long as I want to. It's never going to happen until they're ready. So I love the acronym. I love the idea of somebody that's not only ready, but eager for nurturing, right? That part of it to me is like, listen, not only do they have the humility to understand that like they're going to be taught, right? They're ready to learn, and they're just ready to hear that criticism. And that to me is huge and a huge part. And I'm sure as to why, you're able to have the success that you're having with them, because, again, they got to be ready. They got to be ready to rock. Prime. Yeah.
Absolutely. And take it even a step further, right? Like, I don't want to waste my energy on someone that's not willing to implement it. But at the same time, the people that are lined up that are ready, I can't even get to them. So why would I waste it on somebody that's not going to take it and implement it? 100%. That's the kind of the way I looked at it. I mean, you go all the way back to church, like you go all the way back to the hood days, like, man, like I'm not working with the doughboy. I'm not working with with the low level runners. I'm not doing that. I ain't got time for
Right.
that. Those guys just want to suck your energy out.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know?
If we're not moving in the right direction, we're not moving. So
Yeah.
listen, I want to ask you a couple questions. Is there anything that you want to add to just the end of that part of the story, or?
Yeah, I mean, finalize the nail in the coffin. 2 years ago, my business partners, it'll be 2 years next month, actually in June. My business partners started going in a different direction. I started building out this coaching program. And then 2 years in October, I had my first public speaking gig. I'd done a lot of corporate stuff in the automotive industry and with Tyco and all of that.
Right.
As a public speaker, an internationally professional speaker, keynote speaker like a Tony Robbins, who I work with, he's a good friend of mine, Les Brown, Eric Thomas, Russell Brunson, Ty Lopez, to be one of those guys, you have to have some cred. I just had an opportunity because I put it out there, and I'll never forget, I spoke in Jamaica in front of 5,000 real estate investors, and my good buddy Matt and Caleb Maddox were there. And they're like, dude, you got what it takes. He's been a friend of mine. He grew up in the same church, believe it or not, that I grew up in.
Really?
Yeah. It was
crazy.
Small
world, man. It's a small world, dude.
Yeah. And so the nail in the coffin is I'm in Jamaica. I'm getting ready to go on stage, and my business partners called me. And they're like, man, you're crushing it in the coaching thing. We want to go in a different direction. And so I think we should probably have a conversation about what that looks like when we get home. So my mind is just twisted. Dude, I go on stage and just lay out my whole life story, just like I did with you guys. And it was the nail in the coffin to put that to bed. I honored my non-compete with them. I got home. I said, yeah, this isn't going to work. I'm going to go in a different direction. Let you guys do your thing. I still love them to this day. I honored the non-compete. And just 5-6 months ago, my non-compete was up. So I formed a new wholesaling company, but I've been coaching, speaking the last 2 years. And dude, it's never been better. Here's the crazy part. The nail in the coffin is when you don't take the action required on the information that you have. You're only storing it like a library. It's not until you check out at the library and implement what you got. And I did that. And here's the crazy part. I can't show you guys listening to this right now, but if I look out my window, I'm looking at not just a beautiful neighborhood. I've got the biggest house in the neighborhood, overlooking the neighborhood in the cul-de-sac. But the first thing I see on the other side of the house in the cul-de-sac is a water tower. And 8 years ago, this neighborhood wasn't here, but there was a woods and there was a water tower that I slept under. And I didn't even know it when I bought this house. I had gotten this house, and God said, that's where I brought you from. Dude, I drove to this house when I was in the process of buying it. I drove to this house probably 4 or 5 times with inspections and surveys and builders and all that.
And never clicked.
Never clicked, never seen it. I knew it was the same neighborhood, but dude, I was busy. I wasn't focused on what my that wasn't important to me. But when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And I had been sold out for the last couple of years, taking care of my boy, raising him right, courting this girl right, focused on my business and serving people that were ready to be served. And I'm praying, I'm laying in my office right here, the second or third day that we own this house, and I hear that same voice that said, Daddy, everything's going to be okay. I hear, get up. Oh, bro, dude, things are so good. I haven't heard your voice. I love you. Man, this is amazing. And I'm just talking you would have thought I was absolutely insane. And it just gave me the goosebumps thinking about it.
Yeah.
I look out the window and he goes, stop. That's where I brought you from. Watch where we're going. Dude, it's been downhill ever since. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. Tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of people's lives have been changed. And I've just been immensely blessed. I've got some of the best friends in the world. I literally, you're in my group Leading Through Change, bro. Dude, that group's a month old and we've got 2,000 or 3,000 people just
yeah. And
these are people that love people.
Yes.
These aren't just this isn't just some shitty group, right? So it's been really cool just to see, whatever I do, it seems like I've been able to have the right people in the right seat to give back more than what we take.
Right.
and turns to gold, and in a good way, not just monetary way. So
Yeah, and I mean, and that's not a coincidence, you know. Like obviously, you've talked about, you know, the spiritual side of this and the beliefs there, but in addition to that, like you have to understand that, you know, when you are a certain type of individual, you attract certain type of individuals, and that whole group is awesome. And I love the part where like we really get to understand everybody's story. That's one thing I love about meeting new people in general. Is like that's what keeps us and separates us and makes us all specific and unique, is that we all have a story that will probably surprise the next person. And you know, it's one of those things that's really interesting. Bryce, I got to tell you, man. So you said a couple of things during this whole time that I've been holding on to, and I want to just come back to you on. So first of all, you introduced yourself as a serial entrepreneur. No kidding. My last guest, Glenn Fidel, one of my best friends, real good role model. That's exactly how he introduced himself. So what that tells me is that I'm putting the right people on this podcast for my audience, right? Because these are, you know, people that are starting businesses, growing businesses, and that need this kind of insight. What's super interesting about this whole thing is like the similarities in your story. Like from the moment, like you went and slept on your uncle's couch, like I slept on my uncle's couch, practiced and studied sales on my cousin's computer after he would finish his online schooling. That's how I learned sales. Sales saved my life. Sales saved your life. Like, dude, that part of it is so interesting. And it's like, you know, it's one of those things that it's the reason why we all click and can work together. Now, with that being said, I got a couple of quick questions for you. I know we've gone through almost the hour already, but it's been fun. It's been exciting. We'll have to do a part 2 to this, of course.
yeah.
I had a couple of questions that I don't think you're expecting. I want to go back to moment 1, right? When you were given the opportunity to sell the car, right? Super interesting comparison. After studying sales, I was thrown into the mix. Like, they had a bunch of extra leads that night in the home improvement company that I was working in sales. I was getting into sales at. They're like, we got a couple of leads tonight. Will you go run some of the leads? Well, they didn't expect me to sell any. I sold the first 3. And nobody had ever done that. And then I broke, like, so I'm telling you, but here's my question. My question is, had you not been given that opportunity, now looking back on everything and the way it's all played out, and I know that this is, you know, those ifs, but had you not been given that opportunity then, where do you think and how do you think your life may have played out along the way there?
That's an interesting question because, you know, I got to listen to my inner voice, which is God, right? And I believe that my son is God incarnate sometimes because he just has profound wisdom. I mean, the kid's 8 years old. He's done $12 million in business, right? Like,
Crazy.
He just said the other day, if you see an opportunity, if you don't see an opportunity, make an opportunity. If you don't make an opportunity, take an opportunity. And I'm like, what? And so looking back at that question, I got to look at where I was. Mm-hmm. I was in scrubs, trying to stay warm, detailing cars in the middle of December, in the middle of Iowa. Like, I can't say that I know what I would have done differently, but I know that I wouldn't have passed on the opportunity.
Right.
If it would have been presented, whatever that would have been. And then 2, if I hadn't seen an opportunity, I would have broken down enough to make an opportunity. And I mean, there was little side hustles, bro. I mean, like, dude, of
course,
I was wow, dude. I mean, you get a free car wash when you get an oil change, right? Mm-hmm. I'm wowing them I did a little red carpet thing where I drive their car up and make it look good for the salespeople. I was getting tips from the guys buying the cars. Like, I mean, nice. I was already in that hustle mode, right? So I wasn't just getting paid an hourly wage. I was just always expounding on it. I was just always trying to make it better and always growing. So I can't say that I would change anything if that's, you know.
The reason I asked that question, two reasons actually. One is I kind of look at my business as a vehicle for what would have been entrepreneurship, right? Like, I truly believe that I was an entrepreneur far before I started my first business. And had it not been this one, it would have been another, and it would have gone the same way. And what's really surprised me about that theory and about that thought is I've had people reach out to me who have seen me my entire life, know me my entire life, which I'll tell you, you're kind of familiar with my story too. There was not much room for hope for most people. And yet some people have reached out to me and be like, listen, I want you to know, like, I always saw in you that there was going to be something great down the road. And I'm like, really? Like, and it really shocks me because I didn't give much reason to have, hope for me. And then, so the next part of that is, so your son, like, without really remembering a whole lot of it, got to experience some of these hardships. How much of that do you discuss with him, and how do you think that impacts his momentum and energy now?
That's a great question. So some of the parts of the story I left out because time's sake, and they just probably weren't applicable. I just wasn't feeling my spirit.
Sure.
But I'll tell you this. My good friend, spoken a few times with them on stage, Les Brown said it best. You all have greatness inside of you. Like, it doesn't matter what you believe as far as religion. Like, you can't deny what the good book says, and that's God breathed his life into us. Mm-hmm. And so if he breathed that life into us, we have his own breath. And his first commandment to man in the Bible was what? To be fruitful, then to create, to multiply, and dominate. That's the principle I live by. And so looking back on that, like, we all have greatness inside of you. What I left out of this whole story was that my 9-year-old was diagnosed with autism and Asperger's. He was never supposed to speak. But at 4 years old, he turned around and we were doing something at the park. He, Daddy, I love you. And I'm like, yeah. So you talk about like Lazarus out of the grave type miracles. I can't deny what I've seen and experienced. The kid just spoke last year in front of like 10,000 student athletes in Chicago. Like, I mean, you can't tell me that this doesn't exist, but how does it exist? Because we speak it into existence.
That's right.
And so if any of you listening to this need any sort of encouragement, I'm going to reiterate the words of my friend Les Brown. You have greatness inside of you. And if you tell yourself, I have greatness inside of me, and you put it out to the world, greatness will exude itself.
100%. 100%. I listen to a ton of speakers. And like you said, sometimes you can listen to too much of it, and you just got to get up and take the actionable steps and go out and put them to work so you can actually start to practice them, become familiar with them, and implement the others. But Brian Tracy always says you have everything within you right now to become successful, to become great. You have everything within you right now. And so you're right. What's really, dude, I'm telling you, like, as I hear you talk, the connections are unbelievable. My sales manager for me today here at my company used to work with Les Brown, and I'm talking like 15, 20 years ago. They used to work together. So I'm telling you, just connection after connection. What, again, coming back to the stories, your experiences with your son in the very beginning, my daughter, see, I didn't get to escape prison. I had to go through all that before I learned my lesson. But my blessing moment wasn't the pistol in my mouth. It was, I was supposed to do a ton of time and I got spared. And we'll talk about that another time. But I went home out of nowhere. I have pictures of my daughter when she was born. I met my daughter for the first time in Smyrna prison here in Delaware. And then I have a picture of her 3 years later in the same place, same spot, holding her again. And I use those pictures all the time because not only is it motivation for me, but it's just, it's a representation of how far I've come. But it is super interesting how I see, that in her today. Like we talked about at the very beginning, when you have like some kind of foundation, something that, was perhaps an against all odds deck of cards stacked against you, we find ways to really climb out of it. It's really, really interesting, man.
This will blow your mind, Bobby. And maybe we can end on this because this is a lot more high level.
Yeah.
But you talk about these connections, right? We've all heard, 3 degrees of separation, and whatever, right? We're all one.
Mm-hmm.
We are just spiritual beings in a human experience. Some humans look better than others, but inside, we're all just the same spirit. And if you can tap into your inner self, you can make your human experience the best damn experience you can be.
I agree with that. I like that a lot. Bryce, thank you so much for coming on the show. we're at an hour here, so we're gonna call this part one. I'm not even gonna ask you to come back on the show because we're gonna have to make that happen. We're gonna call
We
this part
should.
one. Yeah,
We
we're
should, we
definitely
should,
gonna
we
make that.
should, we should do some sales training, some
All that.
NLP training. We should do all of that.
I like it. I like it. So we're gonna call this part one. One thing I will ask of you is go ahead and give out the ways for my followers to reach out and follow you, whether social media, whatever. For the people that are on audio, for the people that are watching the video, it is scrolling at the bottom. So definitely reach out, follow Coach Sharpen on Instagram. But go ahead, Bryce, give them a couple of little plugs real quick so they can follow you.
Yeah, brother, I appreciate that. So if you're interested in real estate at all, like I can show you how I had no money in my bank account and went to $150 million with 100% success rate. If you're interested in looking at that, I've got a free group where I've got over 2 years worth of free content. You can search in Facebook, Virtual Wholesaling Real Estate. Tips and techniques. There's over 2 years worth of cold calls and group coaching with my academy that I've repurposed and put in there for you guys. You can search me on Facebook at BRYCE, BRYCE McKinley, or Facebook.com/REI results coach. Instagram is Coach COACH Sharpen, just like you'd sharpen a knife, SHARPEN, Coach Sharpen. And yeah, my phone number's all over the internet. You can't miss me. Google me, and I'd love to work with you if you want to do something or maybe book an interview with my team. Just follow the links.
Cool. Yeah, again, man, thank you so much for your time today, man. What a phenomenal story. Like, again, man, when we talk about the Extra Mile podcast, we're talking about like times where you went the extra mile. Normally I ask my guests, hey, can you name a specific time where you went the extra mile and it just paid dividends in your life? You listed like 8 of them, 9 of them, 10 of them all throughout your story. So I'm not going to even bother you with that. Maybe we'll get to one specific moment
I'll tell
next
one.
time you're on. But what a phenomenal story, dude. I'm super proud of you, super proud to know you. And just looking forward to an ongoing relationship, man. Hopefully I get to learn a lot from you over the next few years, man.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for having me on. And you guys should also, if you want to just hang out with us, like hang out with Bobby and I and other members that maybe he's already had on the podcast, not sure. We do have a free group, Leading Through Change. It's inspiration, it's business tips, it's sales talks. If you have kids, we've got a kids night coming. We just did our first one. It was fire. The middle school millionaire was on there just dropping $1 million nuggets. So yeah, join that group, Leading Through Change. And I agree, Bobby, it felt really good. I haven't told my story in a while. I've been doing a lot of speaking, but I haven't told my story, and I appreciate you allowing me the platform to do that again. And more people need to hear that, and more people need to hear your story. So if you're listening, start sharing your story, even if it's just in little increments, right? The details are not important, but the timeline is. Get your timeline down, and the details will come. They'll come with whomever you're talking to. And yeah, that's my last tip, brother. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on.
That is my pleasure. Our pleasure completely. Thank you. I speak on behalf of my whole audience to just say it was our pleasure. Guys, get with me next Thursday. We're going to make sure that we have next episode of the Extra Mile podcast. That'll be episode 10. Make sure you tune in. Make sure you tune in then and catch us then.